right. Let's see. YouTube, are you there this time? Okay, it looks like it's here.
Damn. Thought I was gonna get out of it.
Well, actually, is it working? Yeah, it looks like it's there.
It sounds like there's like somebody's got like a fish tank in the background.
I have a fish tank in the background.
Okay.
Maybe I should put the fan back on.
No. It just sounds like something like, like those like fountains where there's like a person peeing.
You know, it drives me crazy too.
It's like
so. You give me a second, I will go take care of that.
Okay.
Right? I just got to put a little bit more water in there.
Oh,
I'll be right back.
And the real question is, can you hear my chickens going off in the background?
No, nothing from you at all. No.
This mic is really good and directional.
Oh, okay. Do I sound okay?
Yeah, you sound great.
Okay. All right. Cool. I'm like tossing a link to the show notes. I'm on a different machine.
Let me put it in the chats.
Yeah, I was in the middle of doing like a software update, and then the next time I started my computer, it was like, oh, we're in that 30-minute cycle. That was like, oh no.
Gotta love these machines.
I know, so many security patches, Why can't we get it right the first time?
All right. You able to get that okay?
Yeah. This should be a good one. I remember I looked at the docs like last week. I think you've added to it a bit, and it looks good. So should be good.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm excited to have you and Chris, because I think your experiences are quite different and complementary, and so I think we'll get some good.
Are you calling me an enterprise nerd?
Well, I wasn't gonna say it, but
that's fine.
These days,
definitely. Yeah, these days, yeah. I was originally, and then I did startup stuff for a long time, and then I came back to enterprise because, yeah, I think just it's nice to be at a grown-up company again, So just, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, and I think that perspective will, hearing the water just glug 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 in the background, it's great. That perspective will be fun to play around with here. I have never really worked in a big enterprise with, well, caveat 1 year as an embedded contractor, but other than that, it's been small companies my whole career. So
that's perfect. Yeah, it's a good. We've got a good mix between the three of us.
Cool. YouTube, if you're there, we will be starting shortly. Chris is just topping off the fish tank in the background to keep it from complaining at us.
Mm-hmm.
And this is what you get on JS Party, the pre-show. Talking about chickens, fish tanks, and all sorts of fun stuff.
Yeah, and calling Amal an enterprise nerd.
And Amal calling herself an enterprise nerd.
Implications are, it was implied. Just kidding.
I mean, you heard what you wanted to hear there. I left it wide open.
That's very true.
The verbal Rorschach there.
That's very true, KBall. It just sounds to me like somebody's like swimming. And Chris's.
I think we're good.
Your little box on the screen, it looks like there's somebody swimming. It sounded like, anyways.
All right. I think we're good now though, right?
No
Y'all
sound.
hear anything like
Nothing.
weird? All right.
Nope. Nope. All the background noise has vanished.
All the weirdness is gone now.
Yeah.
We front loaded it, Anyways.
All right.
Cool. All right.
Okay.
I'll hit the intro and we'll be ready to go. Hello, JS Party people. Welcome to this week's JS Party, a party about JavaScript and the web. I'm KBall. I am your host this week, and I am joined by two of our favorite, not always regular panelists. Y'all, I think, are semi-regulars at this point. Amel Hussein. Let's start with you.
Yeah, hi. She's calling me out. I was regular. I just decided to like be flaky for a few months. So, hope to be back on regularly again. But
that's
hello,
what
hello,
I'm
everyone.
aiming for here.
Yeah,
it's challenging you. Let's
call.
lay it out as a challenge.
Okay.
Regular once again, starting
Yeah.
this week. Amel Hussein and Chris Bone Skull Hiller.
Hi. My excuse is that I have depression.
That's real. Yeah.
The JS Party music isn't lifting you up?
No, man. It's bad.
All right. Well, let's see if this topic helps or hurts for your depression, Chris. We are talking today about dev processes. What are the things that we do and the trade-offs that we make to make our lives better as developers. And I thought maybe we could start with one that I've heard from a number of different folks, which is around PR etiquette, best practices for PRs. Different places we could go, and y'all are coming from different backgrounds, but when I say that, a really good PR, in your mind, what does it look like? What are the attributes?
So PRs. I like PRs, despite the depression. But the PRs, they should have a description. Like, number one, when I see a PR, it doesn't have any description in that PR. That's usually from like some other maintainer. And I'm not going to name names. But in case any of them are listening, please put a description in the pull request. So it needs a pull request. Past that, we're talking about open source projects. That's my background, right? We're talking about volunteer labor. So there's not a whole hell of a lot you can ask for. Like, you want tests, you want code coverage. I think table stakes is the build passes. If your project is large and mature enough and you have enough contributors, we can talk about things like, okay, now we must have tests and code coverage, and we must have a certain people reviewing it and all those sorts of things. But in smaller projects and under resourced projects, there's only really so much you can expect. The ideal PR is very different from the usual PR. So
I have that's some great insight from for me, I have a lot to say on this topic, a lot to say about all the things we're going to talk about today in general, actually. But PRs, it's like the most inefficient form of code. Like, I would say, sorry, I'm going to start over. PRs are like the most inefficient form of PR. I'll start over. PR reviewing or code. I'm going to start over. Code reviews. Oh my God. You guys are horrible. Making me laugh. All right. So code reviews are
code reviews?
I think we have some recordings
I'll
for
just
this.
shut up here.
Chris,
I'll turn myself off.
What?
Thank you.
Oh my God. Okay. Code reviews are the most inefficient form of pair programming, right? And so what you're really trying to accomplish in a PR is, not just get your changes across the wire, but communicate change effectively. And so a good PR is like everything Chris, just said, plus it's, one set of changes, something that can be, I really like to think about the rollback strategy as, especially for change, for when you're touching kind of hairy code. It's like, can this be rolled back easily? And so, something that's like digestible, so the smaller the better. I know sometimes it's really hard to avoid big PRs, but keeping them small means that your folks are reviewing it quick. You're getting that feedback that you need quickly, and I think some of the most productive teams that I've been a part of have SLAs within the team where they're like, yeah, we want to try to get a PR reviewed, in 4 hours or less, and that's great because you're not having to kind of switch context and then go back to something else. And so PRs getting reviewed quickly means like, you as someone who's submitting the PR, what are you doing to kind of usher that process along? And so
one thing I want to call out is like how many people should be reviewing the code, and I'm curious what you think, Amal.
I'd say minimum of two, ideally for like production code bases. I think have at least two reviewers. Ideally minimum of two people who like are part of the owners, that like own that part of the code, that are familiar with it. And it never hurts to have a ton of reviewers, but it can get really overwhelming to have like 17 people reviewing one pull request. So I think that there should be some kind of an upper limit to that. But this is like more is
I think there's a
more is not
context
more
here too, though, right? Like to Chris, to your situation, right? Like there's a lot of, if you're submitting a pull request in an open source project, some of those projects only have one person who might be available to review the code.
Right. But some of them might have 17 or greater, and that's like there needs to be not only for those projects.
It's not productive.
Like you gotta have a cap on how many people can do it, and that means for some projects making some hard choices and maybe changing a bit how power is distributed. But yes, definitely I've run into both problems. Where there aren't enough people to review, and there are way too many people reviewing the code because the longer PR stays open, maybe the more people review it, and that's not always good.
Yeah.
The more people you have to please, like the harder it is to land. So, I mean, it's not to say that there are concerns from, anybody might raise a valid concern, and I'm not discounting that. But, like, I don't know. I feel like that is the hard decision you have to make, right? That's the hard choice.
Well, there's an interesting question around that, which is, who merges the PR and who decides if a PR, or what is the decision point that a PR is ready to merge?
Yeah, and of course that varies by project too, right?
Wait, are people still doing manual merges? Because I mean, GitHub auto merge for the win. Like you get that, you get those minimum reviews, and you want to get that automatically merged. Just kidding.
Well, so that is one approach, right? Is you basically set threshold criteria where you say, if 2 people approve this and it passes the build, it gets merged. There are types of changes where that may not be the right approach. So I'm thinking about your rollback criteria, Mel. And it's interesting to think about what types of changes are easy to roll back versus hard. I think there are changes in many situations, anything that's touching data and sort of data migrations or things like that, unless you're extremely careful, which maybe at a large enterprise you can be able to do all the time, but in many situations you'll end up where there's a data change that is hard to roll back. Not necessarily impossible, but it's going to be non-trivial. And those pull requests, I think, might need to be treated a little differently.
Yeah, I know, absolutely. You're right. I was being, tricky there. Absolutely right. I think that for me anyways, as a developer, one of the scariest things, you would see sometimes is like, oh, request for changes, and it's something that I wish we had like more, I don't know, I think we applied more liberally, you know, like I think that I've noticed that like folks aren't always consistent. Sometimes it's like people will just they'll like maybe conditionally approve something, or you know, they'll like formally request changes. But yeah, I think, you know, in cases where you have to iterate, you know, that auto merge like can be a bit dangerous, right? So KBall. But yeah, so I have some
That
more thoughts
raises
on pull requests.
well, one of the things you said there led me in another direction, which is you talked about, you know, different people have different approaches to how they give feedback and how they review. Are there different types of feedback or structures or styles that y'all have found to be more or less effective?
I mean, if you're a jerk, that's not very effective, right? But so what I do, especially not so much with contributors because I take them for granted, like that, you know, maintainers. I take them for granted, right? They're there. I know they're going to keep maintaining. I don't have to be super nice. So I'm going to, if you're like a first time contributor or you're a new contributor, I'm going to like start with thank you. Like before anything else, it's thank you for this. And then, you know, if it's something that I could see potentially getting merged, then I'll go ahead and actually review the code. It might just start with, we're probably not interested in this for reasons, right? And if we are interested in it, then I can look into the code. And so, I mean, what I do is I ask a lot of questions. It's not so much. I mean, there are, you know, this should change for this reason. Perhaps that's like for consistency, but most of my questions are going to be around intent, um, just to just to make sure I really understand what's being added. Um, and I feel like the questions are good. I think where things fall apart, like especially with first time contributors, is that you might not get an answer. And there's a lot of drive-by PRs where people send the PR and then they disappear. And you know, even if they see it through, they might disappear. But yeah, I mean, as a reviewer, certainly I feel like asking questions is always good, and not being a jerk is always good, and actually being excessively polite is always good if possible. But um, I guess I'm curious then about how do I respond to a code review? What is a good way to do that? Because I mean, I don't know. I guess I haven't thought too hard about like when I send a PR, you know, what is effective for me? Any ideas?
I think reviewing your own PR is one, right? So you'd be, you know, surprised at how much you can catch just like looking at your code in a different context than the one that you wrote it in, you know, so just seeing it, you know, in that diff view, you know, in a different context, it really does help. So be your own first reviewer,
Yeah. No, no,
is
no. I
one.
do that too. And then like you start commenting on your own code, and you're like, okay, and you delete the comment, and then you go comment the source code, and you update your PR.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. You know, so there's that. And the other thing I would say is, you know, like definitely like make sure that you're like linting and doing all the things, you know, before you're really marking something as ready, right? I mean, so for me, like there's certain conversations that are just really not productive to have. And that's just like nits about linting and styling and all the stuff that should just be binary. Let the machine deal with it. It's just like a waste of time to argue about, right? So have that, set up your rules, agree on it as a team, and just don't knit in PRs and on stuff like that, because hopefully it should just be part of your like build system. So yeah, I think
a couple reactions I have as well. So one thing I've seen that can be really useful is so you mentioned that when you're reviewing a PR, you do a lot of questions about intent. Some of the best PRs I've received, the person filing the PR actually puts a bunch of sort of PR notes about intent, right? Things that may or may not be in the code, though sometimes it makes sense for them to be documentation, but sometimes it doesn't. But they'll call out like, this is intent, this is not. Another thing that I've seen called out, sometimes you can completely separate structural or refactoring changes from content changes, and that's probably better when you can do that. But occasionally you can't separate those into split PRs. And so I've seen people call out where they'll say like, this is one pull request. This set of changes is almost all just structural refactoring. And this set is new logic, and just helping guide the reviewer's eyes to the key pieces there.
Absolutely. Yeah. I couldn't agree with you more.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, you go.
Okay, so right, a thing that makes that difficult is GitHub, and like it's easy to look at the PR as a whole in GitHub. It is more difficult if you have like, you can't, it's hard to look at it by change set, right? And so, yeah, and it's I don't even know. It's like you need the context too, and it's like it's maybe even an unsolvable problem, because you have, if you're looking at a change set and you see like a formatting change in one, it might be necessary to see the actual like other change set in the same file or whatever. That's part of the, anyway, it's just it's hard, and there are companies that build on top of GitHub's PR stuff to try to make the process better. And I actually use one of them. I can plug it. It's a company called Graphite, and they do fancy stuff with pull requests and reviews, and it's actually pretty useful. So yeah, but anyhow.
Yeah, I've used Reviewable for that purpose as well. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I'd say like to your point about breaking up and adding your own comments to PRs to make it easier and more digestible. And another thing I've seen work really well for like complex PRs is actually setting up a synchronous review with the team and kind of going over it together, on a call and being able to talk through it. And it's just much more efficient to get that feedback and hear where and kind of gauge what's landing well and what isn't, for large change sets when you have it done synchronously. So don't be shy to schedule some time with your team. And I can't believe we haven't mentioned this, but the last fun fact I have about PRs is that there's no such thing as a pull request in Git. The whole concept of pull request is just like a patch that's created, a Git patch, and merge, and like Git creates the interface for what is a kind of quote unquote pull request. And so just
you're requesting them to pull this change from your branch.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it is a
merge
higher level concept on top of the core Git. One other thing I've seen some teams do that I think is useful is kind of codifying the levels of feedback. So I was trying to find an article and I couldn't find it, but I've seen somebody that was talking about like boulder, pebble, sand or something as different layers or I've seen red, yellow, green, basically having a level that is like, this must change for this pull request to be acceptable. Like either this is broken or this is fundamentally wrong in our architecture or what have you. having another layer that is like, this is a recommended change, or I recommend you figure this out. Like, I feel pretty strongly about this, but I could be argued out of it, or something in that kind of middle level. And then a lowest level that I've also seen described as nits, right? This is a minor nit. You could take it, you could leave it. It's not blocking, but making that clear in your feedback, because I've seen, there are some, we are engineers. Some of us as engineers are very detail oriented. And I have seen folks lay out massive amounts of review feedback on a pull request with no context for which things are really important and which things are, this is a, minor quirk that I like, right? And that's really hard to parse as the person submitting the request and say, like, okay, you've given me 30 things here. Like, what should I focus on? Especially for more junior engineers. And so I think some sort of, even if you don't have a formalized practice in the project, like some amount of like laying out, this is important, this is a nitpick.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. I try to do that too.
Yeah, same.
And if it rarely will I end up actually like saying, like pressing the red button and being like, no, we can't merge this as is. Most everything is going to be like of the suggestion variety, right? And yeah, I think that's really important too. I wish there was like a better like interface for that, but yeah, good idea.
Yeah, my style is exactly what KBall just saying, semicolon, blah 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 blah, So it would be really great to see if we could, if there was a way to like have a blocking comment versus a non-blocking comment, like right in GitHub. That would be really cool. So if you're listening, GitHub, back coming for you here.
Yeah, I feel like the three states that a PR can be in on GitHub it might be insufficient. Like I don't know. It's like either yes or no or nothing, essentially, right? And so I don't know. It's like, I guess you can abuse labels to do that, and people do, but
Yeah.
yeah.
One of the things that we've sort of started to stray into here in some of our conversation is CI and CI/CD and kind of this whole area. And so one piece of this is like, what sets of things belong in a pull request review versus being checked by your CI? So what y'all called out, stylistic things, like you should just let the machine do that, have that all be in a config that CI handles. Are there other things that y'all have seen sometimes handled in PRs that instead should be handled in a CI system?
Yeah, like asking for missing unit tests. Really, there should just be a threshold there for new code specifically, as well as just in general, right? So you can kind of automate, like you can't merge this without meeting that threshold. So there's no need to kind of really discuss that synchronously or async. One.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's also kind of dependent on the project maturity. Like, it may be a lot to ask of pull request senders to do some of these things. Like, for example, maybe there's a functional test that needs to get written, and there's no like good example of how to do that specific kind of thing in the code base already, and so it just it can be difficult because I've run into that situation a lot where it's like, okay, here's this new change, I've got this unit test, but I haven't written any sort of like end-to-end type thing for it because I don't know how, and I'm not sure I'm going to have the time to do it or whatever. But and then you just kind of deal with that as it comes. Maybe that means afterwards you need to create a harness for whatever to help that person. I don't know, but it's I haven't seen a lot of projects actually enforce like a code coverage percentage in the open source world. But maybe that's just JavaScript.
Yeah, it depends on the type of project, I suppose. I mean, I guess another one would be really just, kind of a lot of the stuff that developers have to kind of do manually to get, the dressing room type of things to get their pull requests ready, right? So having a bot or something that just posts and auto posts comments, and that's not quite CI. I do think that's like something in between. That's like checking the quality of the pull request and just kind of, just automating that. Like, you're missing a description, or you're missing a screenshot, or, oh, you changed this thing, so you need this thing, does this thing need a feature flag, or any, whatever else,
Right,
so
right. So like
there's
a
all
linter
kinds of a linter, but for the
your
pull request,
right?
for your pull
Okay.
request, which is different from from
Yeah.
your code.
Right. I mean, we've certainly had things like hooks and GitHub Actions type checks for like commit message format. Because the stuff that I've worked on recently has all been pretty hardcore into the conventional commit format, and
Yep.
and so having things to enforce that as well.
Whole thing where it's like, does this thing have a Jira ticket associated to it, right? Just because, like, for compliance reasons, like, you need to be able to track what this change was for. So just even things like that are helpful, because humans are human, and we're gonna human, right? So
Humans are human, and we're gonna human. I love that. Is there a point which is too much in your CI system?
I mean, I don't know a team today that isn't struggling with really exceptionally long build time. How to get around that? That's just a common problem for all kinds of companies. And it's not just like we're compiling TypeScript into JavaScript. It's like all of the things, right? It's the linting, it's all the different, unit tests, integration tests, end-to-end tests. It's, building for different, just testing the different screen sizes, you name it. Like, it's like this expansive kind of pipeline, and, it's just this never-ending compute problem. And so, for a lot of folks who, maybe on a repo, you may especially be feeling that pain, right? Because it's challenge. It's very real, and there's lots of clever things where people are working on to optimize and use computed caches and you name it, but it's still not perfect. There's nothing worse than like having to wait like an hour to like get feedback on your build.
Right.
So.
And then like in my world, most of the time it's just not enough. It's like there's never enough tests. There's never enough. The build matrix is too small. Stuff like that. And another thing that we're running into is, maybe we don't have as many tests as we should, but the tests that we do have push up against the resources of the CI agent or the build agent or whatever, and so like it becomes flaky, and then we need to get a bigger one, and then of course now we need to pay for that bigger one, and it's just like and of course, like, some people are probably paying a lot for something in CI, and maybe a lot more than they should. I'm not really familiar with that myself, but maybe Amal can speak to it. I don't know.
Have you been looking at my credit card bills? Just like Circle CI, NX Cloud. I'm just kidding. No, it's that's very real. I would say that in terms of kind of optimizations, there's things that to folks have done to kind of, like sometimes there's this, you can have a dev box in the cloud where you're developing locally, but all of your compute's happening in the cloud, and that just kind of you're distributing all your stuff, and you're getting faster cycles as a result. Another is kind of leveraging ASTs to really kind of optimize the hell out of your your like all of your build functions, everything from linting to testing to knowing what needs to run, so how do we kind of shorten that cycle? You don't need to rerun, you don't need to rebuild every part of your app, right? But yeah, I mean, it yeah, I mean, this is not a problem that I think we've solved well, but I don't know what.
No, I mean, I think it's definitely a challenge. We're on this curve still of trying to substitute more and more machine resources for human resources, but the machines aren't getting faster as fast as we want to push more stuff in them. And I see that playing out all over the place. Another question related to this is almost every team I'm aware of at this point is doing CI, continuous integration, where there's some amount of testing and things happening when you do a pull request or something like that. Far fewer are doing continuous deployment. Is that something that y'all have done work with or seen work well anywhere?
Okay, well, like in my land, it is in my land, in the projects that I work on. That looks like basically automated releases, which is just like part of the CI process. There are different strategies there. I guess I don't have enough like I know that automatic releases can be a little dangerous, very dangerous, especially if you're not confident in your code coverage and that sort of thing. Like once your project has been like battle tested enough and once you feel confident that it is correct, I think that automatic releases is probably a much safer bet. But if it's not, if there are gaps, I think that's not necessarily the greatest idea. But other than that, it's just these automated releases. There's several ways to go about it, but that's all I know. I don't deploy stuff, so.
Yeah. Just release at 10 p.m.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I've kind of worked in places where there's both kind of an automated deployment process, as well as like like a manual one where there's like a big event or but I think the healthiest models I think for me are just where you're deploying on every pull request, kind of all the things gets deployed, but you're kind of decoupling deployments, right? So that like you have a feature that's behind a flag, and your shipping changes feature, it's going into production with every single merge. You're kind of de-risking the whole project, as you go along. No big surprises towards the end, right? The code's in production already. Perhaps you're even testing it there for a limited set of users. And once you're ready, all you need to do is turn on a feature flag, which would enable like more or less your feature release. And that doesn't have to include a code deployment. And so I think just decoupling deployment and feature releases is one. And the benefit of that is also that as you're deploying frequently and with every merge, you're also able to do the same thing for bugs, right? So if you find an issue in production, it's not this big hoopla, to go and to it's like how quick does your CI/CD pipeline run, and that's plus 1 minute or whatever. It's like how long it's going to take to get that fixed into production. And so it's really having continuous deployment is definitely something teams should try to strive for if you don't already have that. And I think sometimes the hiccup towards to getting to that is like, hey, we're not always ready to like release this thing to a customer, and feature flags can really come in to help manage that that risk for you.
KBall, is it appropriate or not to get into the weeds on this?
No, I actually was going to try to get into the weeds on feature branches and feature flags and things around that, because I think it used to be common to have like a long-lived feature branch,
Oh yeah.
and then you'd have, challenges with merging and all these different things. But I know there are places that still follow that approach. And then feature flags, as you highlight, ML, can be a much better option in some ways, though I think there are also challenges, especially once again when you start dealing with things like data migrations and data changes. But yeah, Chris, go, because I think you have some weeds you want to dig into.
Yeah, I mean, I am not in the weeds myself, but I'm interested in the weeds. So yeah, feature flags is like a thing that is not like in my wheelhouse because that's not like, I don't know. Maybe that's a thing that should be because maybe it makes sense for some of these libraries and apps that I release, Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I don't know. Like, what goes into a feature flag? Like, what should I hide behind a feature flag? How do I flip the flag? Um, you know, Tell me about feature flags.
I
Do you
mean,
want to go, ML?
yeah, sure. So I guess like at its simplest form, right? It's really just kind of a glorified Boolean check, right? So it's like, if the thing, then do this. If not, do that. And so, you're just kind of you're looking at like an application property, and ideally something that's externally managed so that, you can turn these flags on and off without code deployments. But at its simplest form, it's really just a Boolean check that branches, that facilitates the logic branch. And typically you would use a feature flag to kind of handle that, like, progress, to hide work in progress, or to do some beta test for a new feature, or to yeah, because you're not ready to release this into the world, or maybe it's released and you still want to have control over it, or you want to be able to turn it off, like you want to have like an escape, I just want to kill, like you want to kill switch basically, right? So all of those things are enabled by using a feature flag. And a feature flag doesn't have to always be used for a feature. It could be used for a bug fix. It could be used for anything that you want to have a kill switch, or anything that you want to experiment, and in the context of like when a user is running it. And I would say no, like they're not quite feature flags, but the experiment, run node with this experimental flag, right? So you do have those types of things in
Yeah, I was going to say,
like Node.
in like the web app world, typically it's some sort of database batch service, and it might let you roll, depending on, are you using a third-party service, are you rolling your own? It might be as simple as a Boolean across the application. It might be some sort of like gradual rollout. You could do feature flags that vary based on user properties or other things like that. I think in the Node or CLI kind of world, it's probably like environment variables or things like that, where you're saying, okay, this is the default, but you can override it in this way, so we can experiment in these cases. And then at some point, maybe the default flips, but you still have the ability to disable it by passing this environment variable or something like that.
So, I mean, to me, that just sounds, it's just an option, right? It's just like, pass -e to grep or something like that, right? And so, is feature flag just like a marketing term then? Like, because sure, we've always had these things, right?
So one difference in like the web world is it's often not controlled by the user, right? It's not a user option in some way. This is something that we can, as the controlling engineers, toggle based on conditions that we care about, which might be, are you a beta user? Which might be, are you an admin? Which might be, are we past some date? Which might be, have we flipped the switch in the database?
And there's usually like an SDK that you import into your project, because your roll their own, like some, if you have the time and energy to have your tooling that you use to manage feature flags, you can certainly do it. I wouldn't recommend it, but you can. But there's services like LaunchDarkly, Split.io. There's a number of different services that you can use that give you an interface to manage that in a dashboard as well.
So, like in the stuff I work on, would be no need for an SDK. Like, what do you need that for?
In your case, it would be kind of a flag that you would pass in at, like, you'd probably you'd potentially pass in that flag when you're running the library or something like that. Like, for a node package, I don't think it would make sense to do
unless
this,
you want
right?
some way to trigger it remotely.
Right.
Maybe, which actually I could imagine if you're interfacing with a backend system or something like that.
Sure. So something like LaunchDarkly is going to give you like a web UI to manage your flags and add new ones and toggle them on and off from a centralized place or something like that, right?
And like manage experiments and things like that, right? Like, so that is another thing that often gets in some ways rolled up together with feature flags, is like doing this as an A/B test. Can we roll this out to a set of people based on some sort of random distribution and gather data and then make decisions, and sometimes even like automatically ramp up and down who gets to use this based on some sort of other data in the system.
Yeah, and one of the, like, for me, like, to put it colloquially, like, when feature flags are very in clutch, right, is they come in clutch when you're working at scale and you want to do a slow roll up for a feature, right? You're like, I don't want to turn on this whole new, I don't know, a credit card processing workflow, for example, for everyone all at once. I want to have it be on for 5% of traffic, and then I'm going to monitor my error logging and check to see if like nothing is going crazy, and then maybe an hour or a day later you bump it up to 20% and so forth. And so it lets you do a slow roll up as well, right? So KBall is talking about monitoring, like usually, like the thing that you're really looking at is error logs, is the system, and you're looking at your observability stack to see like, hey, is everything still okay? Is this thing working as I expect it to?
Or if
like,
you're in e-commerce, you're looking at purchases, right? Like,
yeah,
just turning this on dramatically reduce the amount of money people are sending our way.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So both from a customer behavior perspective, but also, when you're rolling out infra changes that can, or changes that are like can have a heavy impact on your infrastructure, you're just making sure that like everything is okay.
Break. All right, I want to loop back. Or do you want a bio break?
I don't know. We just usually take breaks, and we haven't taken any breaks.
Oh yeah, no, they've switched it up now. So
I know.
We just have a long flowing conversation, because the reason, meta, y'all are gonna trim this out, Jared, when you're listening through this. The reason is now they're chaptering all of our episodes, so they're having to listen through and insert breakpoints anyway, and so it's really, as they do that, they just put in breaks, so we can keep flowing as long as we want to flow.
Jared is like the person in the world that is, maybe Jared and Adam are like the two people in the world that are the most excited about chapters, though. Like, they're excited about chapters in a way that like I feel like I am not, and perhaps, I don't know. I mean, it's great. I use them, but they like really use them. They're like the power users of chapters. So yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, chapters are great.
I'm not gonna think about that.
Okay. Anyway,
well, whatever.
Since we broke, anybody need a bio break?
No.
All right.
No.
I'll bring us back in. So I want to loop back to something that got mentioned earlier when we were talking about CI/CD a little bit and about PRs, which is tickets. Amal, you talked about, we want this linked to a Jira ticket or what have you. I think open source world, a lot of times it's just issues, people filing things. But some of the things I wanted to talk about here is best practices for what should go into a ticket and how we should interact with it. So first off, like how much detail goes into a ticket?
I don't think there are gonna be enough detail, because that's usually like most of the time people have an opposite problem. I mean, this is so subjective, right? It's like how big is your team? How mature is your team? How long have you all been working on this product? How long have you all been working on together? Like, how long have you all been working to, with each other? There's so many factors that go into like where this dot lands of detail, right? Because I've seen just like a title, right? And it's like, and someone picks it up because they do what needs to be done, and then sometimes there's cases where there's a lot more bureaucracy around like tickets and details, and and so company culture also plays a lot into it. But I think for me, at minimum, as an engineering lead, like I like to think about lowest common denominator, and for me, it's pick this up like new or seasoned, senior or junior, like so I think just whatever, like does this have enough detail for that new person to like know what to do with it. Like I think that's a good North Star.
That's interesting. Like, I mean, sometimes it seems like you might as well just do it if you have to add that much description. You know what I mean?
See, like I said, it's subjective, yeah, and
Right.
it's
I think one of the keys here is how do you know it's done? Right? And if you can label, this is what done looks like. Right? One way I've seen that is acceptance criteria. These things are happening. Or if the ticket is a bug, it's like, this thing broke. It shouldn't be broken, right? And there you do want enough detail to reproduce the bug, for sure. And that's a place, I think, Chris, where maybe this is helpful. If like you want all the detail necessary to get to a repro, even if the person who's reporting this ticket or issue has no idea how any of the pieces underneath that are going to work. Because that reproduction information, and I know this is maybe an unrealistic ask for most open source users, but that's what gets you to the point where you can just pick this up and run with it.
Right. Yeah. There's the Stack Overflow's like minimal viable example. I forget what I used to like copy and paste that URL all the time. It describes like how to like show a reproducible example with with some code or something, and that's like that's the gold standard. That is the North Star, as you would say, right? That's what we want from any bug report, is just show me the quickest way and easiest and most minimal way to reproduce this so we can fix it. But that mostly doesn't shake down like that, right? It's it runs the gamut from it doesn't work to like in the best case it's something, it's somebody just like, well, I can't show you the code because it's proprietary, or here's this huge repo that you can check out. It's about best you can hope for.
Gotta love those bug reports that are just, it doesn't work.
Yeah,
like,
it doesn't work.
Fix it.
What were you trying to do?
Fix it, and fix me while you're at it. Actually, like my kitchen sink's kind of leaky. If you want to come over, it's just like, it's like, yeah, no, it's bug report toughest. Like, and I think it's it's like the understated with bug reports is just like, what version of the software were you running when you incur like when you observe this issue, and what browser were you running? Like, there's so many things that you also want to know in order to kind of like pinpoint if this is even still a valid bug. Because sometimes maybe the last Chrome update fixed this bug, it's like maybe this wasn't even my bug to begin with, right? So,
yeah, we
but
started using the forums, GitHub's forums for bugs, like because they had the issue templates first, which is cool, but then they added forms, and it's like, wow, we can just have people fill in all the
Fill in the
information
form.
here, and that's helpful. That is. But I skip them. I never use them. So.
What about when you're working on an issue? And this may be more relevant in Amel's world than yours, Chris. But like, say there's a customer reported issue working in, like what that you're working on. You pick it up. What types of updates make sense to post back? What what goes back to that ticket in between? All right, I'm working on this. Where you click the assign to me, and it's shipped.
Like updates along the way. Yeah, I would say so one is like, typically for teams I've worked on, we have kind of like a definition of ready and a definition of done. And so, definition of ready is like, when is this like this bug ticket and or feature ticket, like when is this ready to be worked on, right? Like for bugs, like it's, when we have enough detail to be able to reproduce it, etc. Yada yada. For feature tickets, it's when we have acceptance criteria, when we have maybe designs, we've got like there's a number of things that go along the way, and typically, if you're fixing a bug, it's good etiquette once the bug is fixed to just like tag the person who filed the bug to say, oh, bug's fixed now and it's shipped. It's going to be in the next release, or it's already out in production or whatever, or it's main, so that like that's good. You want to have them be able to like retest it and revalidate it and make sure that it's like actually fixed. So that's one. And in terms of kind of when you're working on something that's like a product feature or just an enhancement, typically you have a product owner or product manager or someone on your team that's really driving that direction and strategy that, is going to kind of give you that like kind of product acceptance, so to say, right? And so like, yeah, maybe it's your designer, maybe it's your product manager, maybe it's your tech lead, whoever that is, someone else is validating the thing to say, yeah, this works, and review that at the end of your your sprints or whatever iteration cycle you use to say like, ta-da, I did the thing, that I said I was going to do, and it's done. So
interesting. I'm going to put a couple more things in there that I've seen or used at different times. So one is for customer reported issues. Oftentimes whoever is managing customer support needs to be able to respond back to the customer and let them know. And so I think, the ready, like this is ready, we're starting on it, is good. So communicating some sort of timeline. But especially for higher priority or more urgent things, I have found that having some sort of cycle of updates of just like, I am still working on this. We have not figured it out, or it is not done yet. But there is progress being made. And your team can agree on what that cadence is. But, oftentimes for a very urgent issue, like it might be once a day, or even once, for something that's blocking large numbers of your users using it, once an hour, right? Almost like incident level updates, but expanding that out into larger timeframes for things that are less intense or incredible. But just like, hey, this is still in progress. I'm still working on it. It still has attention. Because I found a lot of times customer success or customer support, like they get anxious, right? Like they're getting bombarded with questions, and it's a black box. They're like, I know that they said they're going to work on this, but I haven't heard anything for 3 days. Like, I don't know what to say to someone. And so providing just, even if it's that brief update, end of the day, we're on target, planning to have it done by end of week, whatever. End of the day, still working on this. Like, it's coming. Can be really helpful.
Yeah. I mean, in my world, big enterprise now. I'm back in enterprise land, and it's typically we have like different severities for bugs, right? Sev 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever. And so if you're working on something that requires that level of communication, which from what you're describing, I would like to be like a Sev 1 or 2 bug. There's definitely, especially for Sev 1, like there's, kind of a war room opened up and people are pinging you for updates. So like that happens whether you like it or not. So like,
Well, it's nice to have a central location, right? So you're not
for
having
sure.
to get pinged by the 5 people who care about this. You're like, go look at the
Absolutely.
ticket. It's up to
Yeah.
date.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, that's a good hygiene period. I think, and I stress that for my team all the time is like, any updates that are like really noteworthy, what, for incidents or not, like you should, even for feature tickets, like just like put a note, like, you know, kind of be remote first, truly, right? Like put it in the ticket, put it in the issue ticket, like leave a log of your updates. And I think on that same note, great practice to start draft PRs for work in progress. It's a good way to just communicate to the team like what direction you're taking and how, what approach you're taking. And you let people kind of give you early feedback, you let people follow along. That's also, it's another kind of way to kind of share updates to KBall's point. Draft PRs, they're great.
Totally. Well, and like those high level, to Chris's point earlier, right? Different things are at different levels of abstraction, and especially with more senior folks, like it may not be spelled out in lots of detail what are the pieces that's going to make this done. It may be a very high level, like we need this feature or we need this thing. Here's what, how we'll know it's done. Here's some acceptance criteria. But that thing may have like 5 or 10 or a bunch of different things inside of it, may have a bunch of unknowns. And a practice that I've used and that I definitely recommend to folks is like when I'm figuring those things out, I will just keep a trail in the ticket as comments of like, okay, I'm looking at this section. It looks like it's going to need this, this, and this. I'm looking at this. Here's the thing that I'm struggling with. Here's what I know. And just kind of like keep a log of what I'm figuring out as I go in that ticket. And it's useful for a couple reasons. Like the main audience for those updates is me, right? That's helping me keep track. If this thing is large enough that I can't keep it all in my head at once, or I'm like having to build up an understanding, that's helping me keep track of what I'm figuring out over time. The secondary audience is, as you highlight with the draft PRs, it gives people a chance to jump in. No, that doesn't look quite right. I don't think that's the right way to think about it. Or like, yeah, that totally seems correct. Or this seems like something we did in this other place. Go check that out. Those sorts of things. The third reason is it gives the opportunity for other people to pick it up if for some reason something else comes in and takes me off of this, right? Like I'm working on this feature, I'm going on it. Oh my gosh, there's an incident. I'm off on this. And then I got pulled in this other direction, but we still need that to happen. But I'm the best person to be working on this incident. So can someone else pick it up? Now there's a whole log of the learning and thinking that's already gone into that somebody else can take and start running with.
Totes my goats. Okay, ball. I feel like I should like, like, can I get an amen? Need like a little choir for you today. But yes, absolutely agreed.
Any other things about tickets before we move on?
I mean, is it a ticket or is it an issue? I mean, can we just make up our
good
mind
question.
about this? Because I think tickets, it's like
I
you're
feel
in
like
a
ticket
you're
is
in a
more
deli.
generic sounding in some ways. Like issue sounds like there's something wrong, but I might
You
just be asking for something.
It's really funny that you say that, KBall, because believe it or not, this is like many, many years ago. Yeah, maybe like, I don't know, almost 10 years ago now. I had someone was trying to pick out an open source library, and they were like, this tool versus that tool, and and this was earlier days of GitHub. And basically this person was like, I don't know, this library seems great, but I'm looking at all the open issues and I'm thinking like maybe this isn't like the most like the best quality, you know? And I remember thinking like, yeah, I don't know. Like, that like I guess maybe, and then like coming back to that like conversation a few years later, thinking like, oh, wait a second, actually, like number of issues is not like a metric for like looking at a project's quality. Actually, like the high number of issues is actually kind of, I don't know, I think it's a good thing. People care, there's activity, stuff going on. I think a metric that would be great to see is like how many of these issues have been closed and completed, but like
lifespan of an issue,
because they're just like piling up, that's like, but yeah, so yeah, issue is I think it's especially for language,
so loaded
people
term.
coming in from different languages, that's very, very loaded. So yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. So I don't know, to be decided, I guess.
Chris, you look like you have a take.
Oh, well, I was thinking about the issue count thing, and then like all like you can say all these things and make all these assumptions, but then you look at the way JDD used to run Lodash, and it was issue 0, and it was one of the most widely used libraries, right? And so you can't look at the issue count and say it was popular, because it was really popular, but he didn't want issues opened, so he closed them all, right?
Not that he fixed them all. He just closed them all.
No, I mean, he probably fixed them all too. But like, it's it's just like, it's not even a thing you can. It doesn't mean anything. Issue count doesn't mean anything, I think, is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
Well, I feel like there's a lot of other topics we could talk about for dev process, but we've been going for an hour, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. So it might be about time to wrap. Any closing thoughts y'all want to leave people with?
Yeah, I guess for me, it's just, software is a social sport. We think about software as this thing that is an isolated experience, and it's very far from that. And so to kind of optimize, our connection points with others, whether it's, communicating through, more effectively in our, or, being more descriptive in the way we write code, optimizing for the human, not the machine, right? All those things, they go a long way. And so I think, kind of anything we can do to change our thinking so that, we're thinking about software as a social sport, I think kind of goes towards, I think, improving all the things that we were talking about today. So.
Yeah, I think as enterprises and businesses adopt more and more open source, and then start hand-wringing about the state of open source security and all sorts of other things around the ecosystem, the way to kind of ensure that these open source projects adopt the best practices and norms that a business or enterprise would be used to is to have more of your employees work on those open source projects and contribute to them, because that's the only way it's going to happen. You can't squeeze water from the stone, or what have you. Like, the people that maintain these projects, it might look pretty hinky from your point of view, because there aren't all these guarantees, and there isn't a bunch of checks and assurances that you would hope there would be, because there aren't enough people to put them there, and there aren't enough people to maintain them. So I would love to see some of these other best practices that come from industry apply to open source projects, but the only way to do that is we need more contributors. It won't happen externally. It won't happen through a grant. Like, it won't happen through awareness. It will only happen through more contributors, more maintainers, and more investment in the open source ecosystem by businesses.
I think that is a great place to wrap us. This is JS Party. I am KBall, and thank you, Amal. Thank you, Chris. Bone Skull. I never know which to call you, because Bone Skull is so good, but it doesn't roll off the tongue. But thank you, and we'll catch you all next week.
All right.
I like that.
And that's a
outro music.
wrap.
Yeah. All right. I'm gonna